Welcome to my channel. Value Old Coins Today videos is one you won't miss. We're diving into the world of coins, so let's get it started. The 1965 United States quarter dollar is a coin that holds an important place in American numismatic history, both for its design continuity and for the major changes in its metallic composition that were introduced that very year. On the obverse of the 1965 quarter is a familiar portrait of George Washington, the nation's first president, which had been a staple on U.S. quarters since 1932 when the design was adopted to commemorate the bicentennial of Washington's birth. This profile bust, created by sculptor John Flanagan, shows Washington facing left with his hair tied back in a queue, a classical style that emphasizes dignity and leadership. Along the upper rim of the obverse appears the word liberty, a foundational principle of the United States, while the motto "In God We Trust" is engraved to the left of Washington's profile. At the base, the year of mintage, 1965, is inscribed in clear numerals. The simplicity of the obverse, paired with the proud depiction of Washington, has allowed the design to endure for decades, with only small modifications over time. On the reverse side of the coin is a heraldic eagle, another enduring American emblem. The eagle is shown perched on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing strength and readiness to defend, while two olive branches curve below, symbolizing peace. The inscriptions "United States of America" stretch across the upper rim, and just beneath, the traditional motto "E pluribus unum," Latin for "out of many, one," emphasizes the unity of the states forming one nation. Beneath the eagle's spread wings, the denomination quarter dollar is clearly marked, leaving no doubt as to the coin's value. This design, also by John Flanagan, was chosen in 1932 and remained in use for decades until the state quarter program began in 1999. By 1965, Americans had grown very familiar with this eagle reverse, which became symbolic of the nation's coinage. One of the most significant aspects of the 1965 quarter lies not in its design, but in its composition. Prior to 1965, U.S. quarters were struck in a 90% silver and 10% copper alloy, a precious metal content that gave them a high intrinsic value. However, in the early 1960s, rising silver prices and increased demand caused widespread hoarding of silver coins, creating shortages in circulation. To resolve this issue, the U.S. Mint introduced a new composition beginning in 1965, a copper-nickel-clad coin. The new quarter was made of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper core. This change was monumental, as 1965 became the first year since 1796 that the U.S. quarter contained no silver. For collectors and historians, the 1965 quarter represents the very beginning of the modern-clad era of American coinage. The 1965 Washington quarter was minted in large numbers, and unlike previous years, it bears no mint mark. During the transition away from silver coinage, the U.S. Mint intentionally removed mint marks from all coins struck between 1965 and 1967. This policy was designed to discourage hoarding and collecting during a time of coin shortage, as the government wanted coins to remain in circulation rather than being set aside. As a result, all 1965 quarters, regardless of whether they were struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, carry no mint mark. This makes it impossible to determine the exact mint of origin without specialized testing, though the overwhelming majority were produced at Philadelphia. In terms of appearance, the 1965 clad quarter can be distinguished from earlier silver quarters by both color and edge. The edge of a 1965 quarter reveals a visible copper stripe, a giveaway of its copper core. By contrast, pre-1965 silver quarters appear solid silver throughout. Weight is another factor. The 1965 clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams, compared to the 6.25 grams of its silver predecessors. Though these changes were subtle, they mark a turning point in American monetary history. Collectors today often keep 1965 quarters as a reminder of this shift, even though they are not rare in the sense of mintage. From a historical perspective, the 1965 Washington quarter reflects the economic challenges of the 1960s and the government's efforts to modernize coinage. It also represents continuity, as the Washington design was preserved even while the materials changed. For many Americans, these coins were the ones they carried daily, using them in payphones, vending machines, and everyday commerce. Though over 1 billion were produced, they remain a tangible artifact of a time when the nation adjusted to the end of silver coinage. In numismatic terms, circulated examples of the 1965 quarter are generally only worth their face value, given the massive mintage and the absence of silver. However, uncirculated or proof-like examples, especially those preserved in pristine condition with sharp strikes and lustrous surfaces, can carry collector premiums. Errors and varieties, such as double dies, off-center strikes, or transitional wrong planchet strikes, such as 1965 dated quarters mistakenly struck on leftover silver planchets, are extremely valuable and highly sought after. Indeed, a genuine 1965 silver quarter is one of the most desirable error coins of the era, fetching thousands of dollars at auction due to its rarity. Ultimately, the 1965 Washington quarter stands as a symbolic bridge between two eras, the end of the silver standard in circulating coinage and the dawn of modern copper-nickel-clad money. It preserved the iconic Washington and eagle designs while introducing a new metallic reality that remains in place to this day. For collectors, historians, and everyday citizens alike, it represents both tradition and change in the evolving story of American coinage. The 1966 United States quarter dollar is a coin of significant importance in both American numismatics and economic history because it belongs to the very first era of copper-nickel-clad coinage that replaced silver in circulating U.S. coinage. Like the 1965 quarter, the 1966 quarter bears a familiar George Washington portrait on the obverse, a design that had been used since 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. Sculpted by John Flanagan, the obverse shows Washington in left-facing profile with his hair tied back in a classical cue, emphasizing dignity, leadership, and the heroic image of the nation's vice president. Above his head along the rim is the word liberty, a word central to American identity. To the left of Washington's chin is a motto, "In God We Trust," which has appeared on all Washington quarters since their first issue. Beneath Washington's portrait, the date 1966 is engraved. This side of the coin presents the balance between reverence for national ideals and continuity of design, showing how American coinage maintained visual stability even during a time of great material change. On the reverse, the 1966 quarter continues the long-standing heraldic eagle design, also by Flanagan. The eagle is displayed with wings spread, perched upon a bundle of arrows that symbolize strength and readiness to defend the nation. Below the arrows, 2 olive branches are spread in a semicircle, symbolizing peace. The upper arc of the reverse bears the words United States of America, while beneath it, in smaller lettering, is a Latin phrase E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. This motto emphasizes unity among the states despite differences, a concept deeply tied to American nationhood. Along the bottom rim appears the denomination quarter dollar. This eagle design had appeared on quarters since 1932 and would continue until 1998, when the 50-state quarters program replaced it. By 1966, the image of the eagle on the reverse had become iconic in American daily commerce, appearing in people's hands in stores, vending machines, parking meters, and payphones across the country. The most defining feature of the 1966 quarter, however, was not its design but its metallic composition. Like the 1965 quarter, it was made of a clad copper-nickel alloy rather than silver. Before 1965, quarters had been struck in an alloy of 90% silver and 10% copper, but with a rising value of silver in the early 1960s, these coins were increasingly hoarded, melted down, or withdrawn from circulation. To stop the drain of silver from coinage, the U.S. Congress passed a Coinage Act of 1965, which permanently removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters. Beginning in 1965, all quarters were struck with a clad composition consisting of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper core. The resulting weight of the coin was 5.67 grams, compared to the 6.25 grams of the older silver quarters. The new coins had a distinct appearance. They showed a silvery surface like nickel, but the edges revealed a visible copper band from the inner core, something that would become a hallmark of modern U.S. coinage. The 1966 quarter is therefore part of this first wave of clad coinage, representing a permanent transformation in American currency. Another key feature of the 1966 quarter is the absence of a mint mark. In order to discourage hoarding and speculative collecting during the transition from silver to clad coinage, the U.S. Mint decided to omit mint marks from all coins struck between 1965 and 1967. This means that all 1966 quarters, regardless of whether they were struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, appear without a mint mark. This makes them indistinguishable by mint of origin and, in a sense, unifies them as representatives of a national effort to ensure a steady flow of coinage into circulation during a time of coin shortages. Collectors today recognize this policy as part of the mint strategy to stabilize the economy while adapting to new coinage materials. In terms of daily life, the 1966 quarter was an essential tool in the American economy. During the mid-1960s, quarters had significant purchasing power compared to today. They were enough to buy a gallon of gasoline, a newspaper, a bus ride, or a handful of items from a vending machine. They were dropped into jukeboxes to play music in diners, used for long-distance payphone calls, and relied upon for small but vital transactions. The quarter was especially important in vending and coin-operated services, as it represented a convenient higher denomination than dimes or nickels. The coins circulated widely, and because of their massive mintage numbers, nearly everyone had multiple 1966 quarters in their pockets at some point. Numismatically, the 1966 quarter is not considered rare in ordinary condition. Because more than 820 million were minted, most circulated examples today are worth only their face value of 25 cents. However, uncirculated specimens, especially those with full luster and sharp strikes, can command premiums among collectors. More significantly, errors and varieties are highly collectible. Examples include off-center strikes, double dies, or, in extremely rare cases, transitional errors where a 1966 dated quarter might have been struck on a leftover silver planchet. Such transitional errors are exceedingly rare and valuable, sometimes selling for thousands of dollars at auction. Collectors also note that proof sets were not officially issued in 1966. Instead, the mint produced special SMS, special mint set coins, which were struck with better than normal quality but not quite proof level finish. These 1966 SMS quarters are especially sought after in high grades. From a broader historical standpoint, the 1966 quarter symbolizes America's adaptation to the realities of a modernizing economy. It reflects a turning point when precious metal coinage gave way to practical, industrially useful metals. For those alive during that time, the 1966 quarter may have felt different in weight and sound compared to older silver quarters, but over time, Americans grew accustomed to their clad coins. The Washington design gave continuity, reminding the public of national ideals even as a material changed beneath their hands. This balance between change and stability makes the 1966 quarter a particularly meaningful piece of mid-20th century American history. In conclusion, the 1966 Washington quarter dollar carries a dual legacy. It represents the second year of copper-nickel-clad coinage that permanently altered U.S. coinage, and it continues the iconic Washington and heraldic eagle designs that have become central to the nation's circulating money. While common in circulation and modest in collector value under normal circumstances, it becomes historically significant as part of a larger transition away from silver coinage, a shift that forever reshaped the coins in Americans' pockets. Today, collectors and historians alike view the 1966 quarter as more than just a piece of metal. It is a testament to the economic decisions, technological adaptations, and cultural continuity of the United States during a transformative era. The 1967 United States quarter dollar is one of the most fascinating coins in modern American numismatics because it represents both the culmination of a historic 3-year period of transition away from silver coinage and a government policy that attempted to discourage hoarding during a time of major economic change. On its surface, the 1967 quarter carries the same familiar design that Americans had seen since 1932, when the Washington quarter was first issued to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. On the obverse, the coin features a left-facing profile portrait of George Washington, designed by sculptor John Flanagan. Washington is shown with his hair tied back in a simple queue, evoking classical sculpture while emphasizing his strength, wisdom, and leadership. The word liberty stretches prominently above his head along the upper rim of the coin, reminding Americans of the founding ideals of the nation. To the left of Washington's profile is a national motto, "In God We Trust," which became a standard feature on quarters starting in 1932. At the bottom of the obvos, the date 1967 is boldly displayed, situating this coin firmly in the middle of one of the most transformative decades in American monetary history. The reverse of the 1967 quarter continues a heraldic eagle design that had been in use since the quarter's introduction in 1932. The eagle is depicted with wings spread, perched firmly upon a bundle of arrows, symbolizing the United States' strength, vigilance, and preparedness to defend itself if necessary. Beneath the arrows, two olive branches curve outward in a semicircle, symbolizing the nation's dedication to peace when possible. Around the rim of the reverse are the inscriptions that identify the coin's issuing nation and value. Across the top is United States of America, while just beneath the eagle's head is a Latin motto E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. This phrase underscores the union of the states into one nation. At the bottom of the reverse, along the rim, appears a denomination quarter dollar. Taken together, the obverse and reverse designs of the 1967 quarter reflect both tradition and national symbolism. These designs would remain unchanged until 1999, when the 50-state quarters program began, giving the quarter new artistic variety. The most historically important feature of the 1967 quarter is not its design, but its composition and context. Before 1965, all U.S. quarters were struck in an alloy of 90% silver and 10% copper, but rising silver prices in the early 1960s caused massive hoarding of silver coins. The government responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, which permanently removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters, replacing it with a modern clad composition, outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The 1967 quarter, like its 1965 and 1966 counterparts, was struck in this new clad alloy. Its weight was 5.67 grams, compared to the heavier 6.25 gram silver quarters minted earlier. Its diameter remained at 24.3 millimeters, with a reeded edge, though the edge of the new clad coins revealed the copper core, giving them a distinctive brownish stripe. For ordinary Americans in the 1960s, the visual and auditory difference was noticeable. Silver quarters had a bright white sheen and a distinctive ring when dropped on a hard surface, whereas clad quarters looked slightly dull and gave off a muted sound. The 1967 quarter therefore embodies a fully established transition from silver to clad coinage. Another critical aspect of the 1967 quarter is the absence of mint marks. From 1965 through 1967, the U.S. Mint deliberately omitted mint marks from all coins. This unusual policy was enacted to discourage coin hoarding and collecting during the silver transition. At the time, collectors and speculators were setting aside coins in large quantities, believing that certain mint marks or years might become scarce. This worsened the coin shortage of the mid-1960s. To stabilize the situation, the Mint removed mint marks for 3 years, meaning that all 1967 quarters looked the same, regardless of whether they were struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. Only after 1968 were mint marks reintroduced to U.S. coinage. As a result, 1967 quarters are unique historical artifacts that reflect government policy during a time of crisis and adaptation. The mintage of the 1967 quarter was extremely high. Over 1.5 billion coins were struck to ensure that Americans had enough circulating money. This massive production means that most 1967 quarters are common and worth only their face value in circulated condition today. However, the Mint did not issue traditional proof sets in 1967. Instead, it created special mint sets SMS, which contained one example each of the cent, nickel, dime, quarter, and half dollar. These SMS coins were struck with better quality than ordinary circulation strikes, but were not true proofs. Many 1967 quarters from SMS sets show a satin or semi-proof-like finish, and high-grade examples with strong eye appeal are popular with collectors. Some SMS quarters also exhibit unusual dye polishing lines or cameo contrasts, making them especially desirable. For ordinary Americans, the 1967 quarter was a vital part of everyday commerce. At the time, a quarter had significant purchasing power. It could buy a gallon of gasoline, a loaf of bread, or a movie ticket in many areas. It was also the standard coin for vending machines, jukeboxes, laundromats, and payphones. In this way, the 1967 quarter was not just a piece of metal, it was part of daily life, exchanged countless times in shops, diners, arcades, and workplaces. Its wide circulation meant that nearly every American had one in their pocket or purse at some point during the late 1960s. Because silver coins were being withdrawn, the 1967 quarter represented the new normal in coinage. Older Americans sometimes complained about the lack of silver, but younger generations grew up with clad coins as a standard, and the 1967 quarter helped solidify that transition. Numismatically, the 1967 quarter is most valuable in certain conditions and era types. Circulated coins are generally worth only 25 cents, given the massive mintage. However, uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS-65 or higher, can bring collector premiums. The SMS quarters from 1967 are especially interesting to specialists, and those with cameo or deep cameo contrast can be worth considerably more. Error coins also exist, including off-center strikes, double strikes, or coins struck on wrong planchets. Of particular note are extremely rare transitional errors where a 1967 quarter may have been struck on a leftover silver planchet. Such coins are among the most valuable errors of the clad transition era, sometimes selling for tens of thousands of dollars when authenticated. In conclusion, the 1967 Washington quarter dollar is far more than just a piece of small change. It represents the third and final year of the Mint's no-mint mark policy, the solidification of copper-nickel-clad coinage as a permanent replacement for silver, and the government's struggle to adapt to economic pressures in the 1960s. Though billions were minted and most examples are common today, the coin carries immense historical weight as a symbol of transition, adaptation, and continuity. The Washington portrait and heraldic eagle design gave Americans a sense of familiarity and tradition, even as the very substance of their coinage changed.